1 year ago, I made one of the biggest decisions of my life. I walked away from a stable career in IT, left my family behind, packed everything I could fit into 2 suitcases, and boarded a plane headed for the Philippines. Most people thought I was making a big mistake. Some people thought I was crazy. I was moving halfway around the world to meet a woman I had only known online. Friends warned me. Family worried about me. A lot of them had heard stories about Mindanao and the Philippines. Stories about safety, about kidnapping, about Americans getting into trouble. Most of what they knew came from things that they had only read online. And honestly, there were times where I worried about that myself too. I wasn't moving here with some huge retirement account. I wasn't independently wealthy. I had about 1 year of savings, that's it. My plan was simple. Either I figured out how to make YouTube work, or I find a remote job, or eventually I'd have to go back home. But money wasn't my biggest fear. My biggest fear was what would happen when I finally met Sarah in person. What if we had no chemistry? What if everything felt different face to face? What if I had just given up my career, left my country, and risked everything for something that wasn't even real? Looking back now, it's hard to believe how much life can change in just over 1 year. Because after moving to the Philippines, I almost gave up and went home. In fact, at one point, I actually did go back to America. And what happened during those 5 weeks changed everything. But before I tell you about that trip home, let's go back to the day I first stepped off that plane in the Philippines. When I first arrived in the Philippines, I was nervous. Sarah and I had spent countless hours talking online. But until you meet someone face to face, you just don't know. A video call can only tell you so much. What if the chemistry wasn't there? What if things felt awkward in person? What if I had just left my career, my family, and entire life behind for something that wasn't real? Thankfully, those fears disappeared pretty quickly. The connection we had felt online felt exactly the same in person. For the first time, I could relax. I didn't have to wonder anymore. The person I had spent all those months talking to online was exactly the person who she said she was. The truth is, those first few months were amazing. Everything felt new. I was experiencing a different culture, trying different foods, exploring places I had only seen in videos, and building a life with someone I genuinely cared about. For a while, it felt like everything was falling into place. I started thinking maybe all those people who warned me were wrong. Maybe taking this risk was one of the best decisions I've ever made. But eventually, the excitement started to wear off. And that's when reality showed up. As the months went by, life in the Philippines started to feel less and less like a vacation and more like real life. And with real life comes real problems. One of the biggest challenges was money. When I left America, I had about a year in savings. The plan was simple. Either YouTube started generating enough income to support me, or I find some kind of remote work before I run out of money. At first, I wasn't too worried. But month after month, I watched my savings slowly getting smaller, and YouTube wasn't paying enough to make up that difference. I started applying for remote jobs, looking at IT positions, customer service jobs, anything that would allow me to continue living in the Philippines if things worked out with Sarah and I. At the same time, I started missing home. Not enough to pack my bags and leave, but enough to notice. I miss seeing family, I miss seeing familiar places, I miss knowing exactly how everything worked. Even simple little things can feel exhausting when you're living in a completely different country. And while Sarah and I cared deeply enough about each other, we were still learning how to navigate a relationship between two different cultures. Sarah speaks English very well, but it's still her second language. And when you're talking about difficult emotions, sometimes things come across the way you don't mean them. There were moments where both of us felt misunderstood, not because we didn't care, but because we were still learning how to communicate with each other. And after months in the Philippines, I started questioning things. Had I made a mistake? Was everyone back home right? Was this relationship really going to work long term? And then, after about 6 months in the Philippines, I got on another plane. This time, I was heading back to America. The trip back to America had always been planned, though. Part of the reason was to spend time with my family and help my parents out. But if I'm being honest, part of me was also curious. I wanted to see how it would feel being back home again. For 5 weeks, I stepped back into the life I had left behind. I drove the same roads, saw familiar places, spent time with family, and for the first few days, it felt comfortable. It felt familiar, easy, but something unexpected happened. Instead of reminding me why I should stay in America, it started showing me how much I miss my life in the Philippines. I miss Sarah. I miss the simple routines we had built together. I miss waking up beside someone I cared about. What surprised me the most was that Sarah was worried too. Later, she told me she was afraid I wouldn't even come back. She was afraid that once I got home, I'd realize my old life was easier and decide to stay. But the opposite happened. For the first time, I could actually picture both futures, one where I stayed in America and one where I came back to the Philippines. And when I pictured my life without Sarah in it, something didn't feel right. I wasn't just missing the Philippines. I was missing the life we were building together. And that's when I realized this wasn't just some temporary adventure anymore. And when it was time to leave, I got on another plane. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I was going back to the Philippines. I was going back to Sarah. But even then, our story wasn't finished. In some ways, the hardest part was still ahead of us. Coming back to the Philippines felt right. I had spent 5 weeks back in America, and for the first time, I knew exactly where I wanted to be. But knowing where you want to be and knowing how to build a successful relationship are two different things. The truth is, coming back didn't magically solve all of our problems. Sarah and I still had things we needed to work through. We came from different cultures, we communicated differently, and there were still moments where we struggled to understand each other. When I think about that time, I realized both of us were afraid. Afraid of getting hurt, afraid of being vulnerable, afraid of fully trusting someone with our future. For most of my life, if a relationship wasn't working, it was just easy to walk away. It was easy to put up walls. It was easy to protect myself. And if I'm being completely honest, that's exactly what I was still doing. Even after coming back to the Philippines, even after realizing how much I missed Sarah, part of me was still holding back. Part of me still had one foot out the door. And eventually, I made the decision to move out. In hindsight, that was probably the closest we ever came to losing each other. Not because I hated Sarah, not because I wanted someone else, and not because I didn't care. I just needed space. I needed time to figure out what I really wanted. I needed to know if this relationship was truly the future I saw for myself. Today, I know that decision hurt both of us, but at the time, I thought it was the right thing to do. What I didn't realize was how much Sarah was fighting for us behind the scenes. Because while I was questioning everything, she never stopped believing in us. One of my biggest fears from the beginning was wondering if Sarah truly loved me. People hear stories online, they hear the stereotypes, they hear the warnings. And when you move halfway around the world to be with someone, those thoughts can sometimes creep up on you into your head and magnify, even when things are going well. But during that difficult period, I started seeing something I hadn't fully allowed myself to see before. Sarah wasn't trying to hold on to me because she wanted something from me. She wasn't trying to hold on to me because I was an American or because I lived in another country. She was holding on because she genuinely loved me, and she didn't want to lose what we had built together. For the first time, I stopped looking at all the reasons things might not work, and I started looking at all the reasons why they could. Then, just when I thought I had finally figured things out, life threw us another curveball. Sarah told me she was pregnant. And in that moment, everything changed. The future wasn't just about me anymore. It wasn't just about whether I wanted to stay in the Philippines or whether YouTube would work or whether if I could find a remote job. Now there was a family to think about, a child, a future. And strangely enough, instead of feeling trapped, I felt something else, clarity. For the first time since stepping off that plane, All the doubts, fears, and questions that followed me for over a year started to slowly disappear. I stopped holding back. I stopped keeping one foot out the door. I stopped preparing for an exit plan. For the first time since leaving America, I wasn't thinking about what I would do if this failed. I was thinking about how to make it succeed. And I finally gave Sarah 100% of myself. Because by then, I knew exactly what I had. And I knew exactly what I didn't want to lose. Looking back now, it's hard to believe how many things could have gone differently. I could have stayed in America. I could have decided the risk wasn't worth it. I could have listened to every warning, every stereotype, and every fear. And honestly, there were moments where I almost did. There were moments when I questioned everything: the relationship, the move, the money, the future. But if I've learned anything from over the last year, it's that some of the biggest opportunities in life are hiding behind the things that scare us the most. Before I moved to the Philippines, people warned me about Mindanao, about the Philippines. Looking back now, I realize most people weren't trying to stop me. They were trying to protect me. They warned me about moving for love. They warned me about leaving a stable career. They warned me about starting over at age 46. And while some of those concerns were understandable, none of those warnings told the whole story. Because nobody could have told me about the family I would find here. Nobody could have told me about the friendships I would build. Nobody could have told me that the woman I met online would become the person I trust most in the world. And nobody could have told me that one day we'd be preparing to welcome a baby together. The truth is, taking a chance doesn't guarantee success. Sometimes things don't work out. Sometimes risks fail. But sometimes taking a chance completely changes the direction of your life. And that's exactly what happened to me. Whether it's moving to another country, starting a new career, pursuing a dream, or taking a chance on love, I think the biggest mistake isn't failing. The biggest mistake is never trying at all. Because if I had stayed where I was comfortable, I would have missed out on the best chapter of my life. Thank you for following our journey. And thank you for checking out this video. Also, I'm excited to announce we have a new YouTube page, Nomad Island Escapes Unfiltered, where it shows the videos where we just pick up a camera, hit record, and we just upload videos, not worrying about any type of numbers, meeting any goals. Just hit record and show life as it happens with me, Sarah, Sammy, and little Kylia on the way. So if you're curious about those unfiltered moments with me and my family living in the Philippines here, check out Nomad Island Escapes Unfiltered.